Today's lesson is 13.5, fractions and decimals on the number line. The objective for today is that I will learn to locate and name fractions and decimals on a number line. The first question we're looking at says, or first problem, says, Jordan jogged 3/5 of a mile and walked 3/10 of a mile to get to the park. How can a number line be used to show these distances? So when I'm working with a number line, what's super important is I have to figure out kind of what is my denominator going to be? What's my common denominator between the different fractions I'm looking at? So I have to do what I worked on in a previous lesson and find a common denominator between two different fractions. And that will tell me how many sections actually need to be on my number line. Well, if I'm looking at the two fractions involved here, because he goes 3/5 of a mile and he goes 3/10 of a mile, I need a number that both 5 and 10 have in common, so a common multiple. Well, pretty quickly, I am assuming most of you realize that 10 is going to be your common multiple. So I'll leave my 3/10 the same, but I have to change 3/5 to a new equivalent fraction that would be equal to the denominator of 10. So 5 times 2 is 10. Whatever I do the bottom, I have to do the top. So 3 times 2 is 6. So 6/10 and 3/10. Because I'm doing it that way, hopefully you've done that in your notes as well, I want you to also draw out this number line. Because I'm doing my denominators, I'm looking at I have a common denominator, that tells me how many sections I need on my number line. So I start with my 0. After 0, I need 10 sections. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hopefully you did a better job spacing out your number line than I did. Now my last one, this would be equal to 1 whole or 10 tenths. We've talked about that before, that 1 whole is always a full fraction, the same number on top, same number on bottom. So I have the whole entire section. So for tenths, I start by representing where on my number line I have, he jogged for 3/5 of a mile. So he went 6/10 first. So I need to find on my number line. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6/10. So I've got my 6/10. He jogged for 6/10, and then he walked for 3/10. So he walked for 3/10 of a mile. If the problem were asking me to say where or how far away the park was, I would want to add 3/10 to my 6/10. But in this problem, all I'm needing to do is actually just say where on my number line would 3/10 and 6/10 be at. So that's where I have this part and this part right here. Again, make sure you have those on your number line as well. Now, the next one is finding 43 hundredths on a number line. Well, I personally don't want to write out a number line that goes all the way from the very beginning at 0 to 100. But what I can do is I can think about where it would be using my skills with equivalent fractions. So I'm going to find an equivalent fraction for 43 hundredths that's actually going to fit on a number line that goes from 0 to 10. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to start by creating my number line. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, which would be my 1 down here. Well, if I think about 43 hundredths, 43 is somewhere between 40 hundredths and 50 hundredths. I can find equivalent fractions for both 40 hundredths and 50 hundredths with a denominator of 10, because 100 divided by what would give me 10? Well, I know that 100 divided by 10 would give me 10. So whatever I do on the bottom, I would have to do on the top. So 40 divided by 10 would give me 4. Same thing down here. 50 divided by 10 would be 5. So on my number line, I'm going to start by graphing 4/10 and 5/10. So 1, 2, 3, 4/10 would be right here. 5/10 would be right here. So now if I know that 43 hundredths needs to be in between those two. And so at this point, I try to find something close, and I would say that this would be 43 hundredths on my number line. Again, it's finding an equivalent fraction that works with this type of number line. I can also draw another number line, which I'd like for you to go ahead and do in your notes. And this time, I'm going to almost take out a section of my number line. And I'm going to have 40 hundredths here. and I'm going to go for 10 until I get to 50 hundredths. So I've got 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50 hundredths. So this is almost like I just pulled a section of an entire number line, and I'm only looking at the parts that's between 40 hundredths and 50 hundredths. Now I can also plot my 43 hundredths on here. So 1, 2, 3. This would be what would be represented by 43 hundredths. And if I were a perfect drawing person, then my number lines would hopefully line up and I'd have 43 hundredths in the same spot. I'm a little off, but mostly that's because I didn't use a ruler to separate out all of my parts. Now, in your notes, I want you to see if you can take a look at number 1 and number 2. It says use the number line below to name the fraction. The first thing that we need to do is figure out how many total parts we have in this section. So you are looking for letter A and letter B with a fraction that represents each one of those. When you've done that, then we're going to take a look at 3 and 4. It says to name the point on each number line for the decimal. So on number 3, it says to name the point for 1 and 33 hundredths. Well, what's really important is to take a look at the whole number here. So if it says 1 and 33 hundredths, I need to figure out where my 1 is and look for the spot after that. Well, on this one, I've got 1 and 30 hundredths and then 1 and 35 hundredths. So if I look here, I've got 1 and 31, 1 and 32, 1 and 33 hundredths. So that means letter F would be my representation of number 3, 1 and 33 hundredths. In your notes, I want you to see if you can figure out where number 4 is at based on this number line.